Thank you, Fernando Carvajal, University of Patagonia, and Emprender Conectados for this invitation to get curious with me, specifically on the questions of education, entrepreneurship, and how they all come together to not only help improve education, create more responsible entrepreneurs, but really make a better world. So when it comes to education and innovating education, how I think education should be innovated today, it really comes down to this understanding that education is fundamentally broken because its primary purposes, its two primary purposes are test scores and employment. Now, this sounds good on paper, but life isn't lived on paper. You see, test scores neither reflect nor encourage lifelong learning. Rather, they give learning an endpoint, which in turn encourages people to end their learning. And we see the consequences of this today in everything from politics to global warming to our poor diets and health. The idea of preparing students for employment is flawed because many jobs that exist when students start school won't exist by the time they finish school. And the jobs that will still exist do little to encourage satisfaction in life. And this in turn leads to weaker families, weaker communities, and poor economies. Now, this is why I believe all education, no matter how young, no matter how old, or where you are on the planet, all education needs to start with curiosity and then follow along processes and practices of entrepreneurship. This way, we can ensure that all learning is relevant to the learner, useful to their communities, because their learning will be practical, action-based, reiterative, and incentivized to continuously learn, experiment, learn more, and then repeat. This translates directly into encouraging learners to become responsible entrepreneurs and/or responsible consumers. This way, instead of having education and economy as two separate things, by integrating them together, we're really more nimble and we're more practical. Not to mention, we're more responsible. This way, instead of having people go out and create businesses that harm communities or destroy the world, we can make sure we have more socially responsible businesses. And even if all learners don't have to become entrepreneurs. There's so many different career paths to choose. But having this fundamental understanding, it also encourages us to be more responsible consumers, to not be blinded to how businesses work and how marketing can manipulate us and drive us to do things we may not otherwise do or be. But just as importantly, the way entrepreneurs work is fascinating as an educator myself, because there are no real tests or exams or homework in entrepreneurship. It's just work and then see if the audience takes it, see what the response is. And then based on that response, you reiterate or you change. And in order to reiterate and change, you need to keep learning. So it's fascinating. As someone who's from education and has gotten into entrepreneurship, it's one of those things where all the struggles and the things that we complain about in education, when you look at the world of entrepreneurship, all these light bulbs go off and you realize, well, what if we could do that? Or what if this were an education? So I think one of the easiest, most accessible ways to start changing education in order for it to help our economies and our communities is to start blending these elements and these processes, these philosophies and attitudes from entrepreneurship directly into education. And then at the same time, it goes both ways, right? How can we then take the importance of education and the learning processes, and not just what we learn, but how we learn? How can we share that with entrepreneurs so that they become better entrepreneurs and create better products and services? So I think this dialogue, or this cross-pollination of education and entrepreneurship, is one of the best ways to make sure that we're constantly innovating in education, but we're also creating responsible entrepreneurs and consumers. Now, as far as other countries and places in the world to look toward for inspiration or ideas on education, there are some. I will say, I don't think anybody's got it 100% correct, right? Now, a few examples from personal experiences. One of the things I really enjoy is in South Korea, where education is a part of the culture, and not just a part of the culture, but admiration for educators and admiration for education. It's a cultural value in some countries like Korea. And I wish we had more of that in the United States and other places, right? I remember growing up here in the United States, it was kind of looked down upon if you were doing well at school, or other kids or friends would kind of like, oh yeah, like nerd, or like, let's forget school. School's boring, or teachers are dumb, and all of that. Where in some parts of the world, it's a completely different culture and attitude. And I wish that would be adopted all over. Another one is Finland, right? I think a lot of people can point to Finland, and it doesn't take a lot of research to realize what Finland is doing. I'm a little confused why it doesn't spread to more countries, but Finland has gone out of its way to really destroy some of the traditions and standards of how we do school, from getting rid of school subjects to getting rid of grades to sometimes even getting rid of the classroom walls. So tying it all together, if there's a way that we can truly not only reimagine education, but create the school of tomorrow today in a way that's not confined by the walls of the classroom or the textbooks of yesterday, but we actually start with curiosity to make sure that all learning is relevant and connected to the learner, his or herself, but then follows along pathways of entrepreneurship, of empathy, and of discovery. I think this is the way to not only make stronger ties between education and our economies, but a way to make sure that our education is always innovative, but also appropriate for today and the future of that we all have tomorrow. And in doing so, not only will our economies improve, but our local communities will get stronger. And by the economies and the communities getting stronger, they'll create a ripple effect throughout the entire world that we can all, as humans, find a better way to live together on this planet and really prosper together in ways that maybe our ancestors couldn't even imagine. So thank you again for asking me to share some thoughts. Always curious to get even more curious with people on how we can start blending these worlds of education and entrepreneurship to create stronger, healthier, more responsible communities, not only today, but for tomorrow. Thanks.